My name is Faith Ingram and I'm 34 years old. On the morning of our family trip, I stood at the check-in counter at Logan Airport while an agent told me my ticket had been canceled and that my family had already boarded. I checked my phone. One message from my sister sent at 5:52 a.m. You should be taking care of the kids. Under it was a photo. My twin nieces, 7 years old, sitting alone at a departure gate with their purple backpacks in their laps. No adult anywhere in the frame. I thought that photo was the cruelest thing my sister would ever do to me. I was wrong. It took 8 months for her to come back and what she asked me for when she finally stood in my kitchen. That's the part nobody believes. Before I tell you what she wanted, you need to hear what she left behind. Welcome back to Behind Closed Doors Revenge, where family secrets come to light and quiet people find their voice. If stories about standing your ground speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe so you never miss one. Now, let me take you back to that counter at Logan. I got to Logan 3 hours early that morning because that's who I am. I'm a pediatric nurse. I plan for delays the way other people plan vacations. Patricia had booked the whole trip herself. 10 days in Florida, her treat, 1 reservation for all 6 of us. Family rate. Faith, don't you dare touch your credit card. I had offered twice to book my own seat. She laughed me off both times, and arguing with Patricia was like arguing with a billboard. So, on June 14th, I rolled my suitcase up to the counter, handed over my license, and watched the agent's face do something complicated. She typed. She frowned. She typed again. Ma'am, this reservation shows your seat was canceled last night by the booking holder. I asked her to check again and she did, and then she said the sentence I still hear on bad nights. Your family has already boarded. The flight to Miami had pushed back from the gate 11 minutes earlier. I called Patricia. It rang once and went to voicemail. I called my mom straight to voicemail. She turns her phone off the second a flight attendant looks at her. Then the text came through with its little chime, cheerful as a doorbell. You should be taking care of the kids. And the photo, Sati and Quinn side by side in those vinyl airport chairs, feet not reaching the floor, purple backpacks hugged to their chests. Quinn's thumb was in her mouth. She'd quit that habit 2 years ago. I was still staring at it when the loudspeaker said my name, my full name, twice, and asked me to report to the airport security office on the lower level. My hands went cold before my brain caught up. 2 little girls were sitting in that office. And they were mine now. I just didn't know it yet. The security office smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. A state trooper stood by the door and behind a desk sat my nieces sharing a granola bar somebody had given them. Sati was talking a mile a minute to the trooper, to the desk sergeant, to the room. That's what Sati does when she's terrified. She narrates Quinn wasn't saying anything at all. She saw me and crossed that office like a swimmer reaching a wall and her arms went around my waist and locked. A woman from the airline handed me a piece of notebook paper in a plastic sleeve. Patricia's handwriting, rounded and pretty, the handwriting of a woman who practiced her autograph in high school. Their Aunt Faith Ingram will pick them up. My phone number underneath with a little dash between the digits like she had all the time in the world. A gate agent had found the girls 20 minutes after boarding closed, sitting right where their mother told them to wait. The trooper needed my license and my statement. The airline needed forms. Somewhere in the middle of it, I asked the question I'd been circling. The Miami flight. They had a connection. The airline woman checked her screen and nodded. Miami. Then onward, international. She wasn't allowed to say more and her eyes apologized for it. International. The family trip was Orlando, the aquarium, a rented house with a pool. Nobody had said a word about international. The trooper kept the note for the report, he said, sliding it into a folder. And I remember being annoyed about that. It would be months before I understood that folder was the first brick of everything that came later. I signed where they pointed. Then I took 2 7-year-olds home in a cab I couldn't afford. You have to understand how our family worked, and I can explain it with one porch. Growing up in Quincy, my mother used to brush Patricia's hair out on the front steps in full view of the street. 40 strokes in the evening light, neighbors walking by, my mother waving. I watched from the window. My hair got brushed inside at the kitchen table fast before school. When I made honor roll, Mom said, "You're my easy one. I never have to worry about you." She meant it as love. I banked it as a job description. Patricia was 5 years older and beautiful in a way that organized every room she entered. She was the show. I was the stage crew. It stayed that way straight through her wedding to Derek, where I spent the reception in flat shoes with a clipboard, chasing a late cake, while the photographer arranged my sister under a willow tree. She hugged me at the end of that night, smelling like champagne and hairspray, and said I was a lifesaver. And the strange truth is that it felt good. Useful was the only currency I knew how to earn. So when Patricia turned her life into a brand, the Hale Life, 200,000 followers, matching outfits on the twins, a kitchen that existed to be photographed. Nobody in our family blinked. It was the porch again with better lighting. Patricia always needed an audience. What I didn't understand yet was how much she needed one, what it cost to keep, and what she was willing to leave at a gate when the bill came due. Here's what my life looked like the morning before the airport because I want you to see what was on the table. I'd been a pediatric nurse for 11 years, the last 6 on the overnight floor at the Children's Hospital downtown. Overnights pay a differential. I took every shift they'd give me, packed my lunch, kept my 10-year-old car, and bought a 2-bedroom condo in Dorchester that I loved with my whole chest. And on my refrigerator, under a magnet shaped like a lighthouse, hung the letter I'd read maybe 200 times. I'd been accepted to a pediatric nurse practitioner program in Seattle. 6 years of saving, 1 seat, classes starting the last week of August, a job offer on the far side of it. A whole life where nobody called me at 6 o'clock in the morning to borrow my Saturday. My friend Dana, charge nurse, mother hen, zero filter, kept threatening to frame that letter. "Who's going to cover everybody's shifts when you're gone?" She'd say, "Let them suffer." Snorts, the plan was simple. Do the family trip, come home, list the condo, drive west with everything I owned in the trunk. I had a deposit down. I had a roommate lined up for the first semester. I had a countdown going in my phone. 71 days. Instead, on night 1 of the new arrangement, I stood in my hallway at 2 a.m. looking at my own suitcases, still packed for Florida, still standing by the door. Next to them, on the floor of my second bedroom, 2 little girls were finally asleep in a bed I'd made up with hospital corners because my hands needed something they knew how to do. The first nights taught me the new rules of my own home. Quinn could not sleep unless the hallway light stayed on and her sister's bed was touching hers. She didn't ask for this in words. She dragged the bed herself 6 in at a time and I helped and neither of us commented. Sudie had a different ritual. She took her purple backpack, the one from the photo, the one from the gate, and she packed it. Pajamas, a toothbrush, her stuffed rabbit, a juice box she rotated out when it got warm. Then she zipped it shut and stood it by my front door. Straps up. Ready. So we're ready when Mom comes back, she said in the tone you'd use to explain where the forks go. I opened my mouth to say something honest and gentle. And then I closed it because she's 7 and Hope is load-bearing at 7. The backpack stayed by the door. I learned to step around it the way you learn a new house in the dark. Just after midnight on the 4th night, my phone lit up on the nightstand. A notification, the old reflex. I still followed my sister. Patricia had posted a story from somewhere with tiki torches. A cocktail with a paper umbrella, an infinity pool going gold in the sunset, bare feet on a lounge chair. The caption said, "Family time is everything." I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and read it maybe 10 times. Down the hall. One of her daughters was sleeping with a packed bag pointed at the door like a compass needle. I put the phone face down. Whatever this was, it wasn't a panicked mistake. It had an itinerary. The stage showed up on day 6 in sensible shoes. Her name was Marissa L. Vega, a caseworker with the Department of Children and Families, and she had the tired kindness of somebody who has seen every version of this kitchen table. The airport police report had triggered a file. Abandonment, suspected. She walked me through words I'd never had reasons to know. Kinship placement, background check, home visit, emergency hearing. She measured my second bedroom with her eyes, watched Suddy pour cereal for Quinn without being asked, and made notes in a folder that was already thicker than I expected. "You're a pediatric nurse," she said. "That helps. Courts like relatives, and they like relatives with steady jobs." I told her I had a leave of absence form half filled out in my bag and a charge nurse already juggling my shifts. She nodded like she'd guessed. Then at the door with her coat half on, she asked the question that snagged. "Has anyone from the family contacted you about the parents' finances?" I said no. I asked why. She gave me a look I'd file away and understand in September. A look that said she'd read something in that folder she wasn't allowed to say out loud. "Keep records," is all she answered. "Everything, receipts, texts, dates, you'll thank me." That night, I started a notebook because I'm a nurse and charting is how we pray. First entry, 2 names, 2 birth dates, 1 door with a packed purple backpack beside it. I didn't know yet that I was building a case. I was just doing the thing I always do, writing down what the fever's doing so somebody later can see the pattern. That weekend, I drove out to Weston to get the girls' clothes, and I let myself in with the spare key Patricia kept under a fake rock that cost $40. The house was staged, even with nobody in it. Throw pillows chopped, candles centered, a bowl of lemons going soft on the island. It took me 10 minutes to notice what was wrong because what was wrong was invisible. The master closet was half empty, not vacation empty, gone empty. Winter coats missing in June. The safe in Derek's office stood open, cleaned out, keys still in the door. On the kitchen counter, a stack of mail a foot tall. And I'm not proud of this, but I looked. Final notice. Final notice. A letter from the bank about the mortgage with a phrase I had to read twice. Intent to accelerate. A statement for a credit card with a balance that had more digits than my annual salary. And taped to the front door when I left, tucked behind the seasonal wreath so the neighbors wouldn't clock it, a folded county notice dated 2 weeks before our trip. They had known. While Patricia was posting a countdown to family adventure time with airplane emojis, this house was a sand castle at high tide. Upstairs, the twins' room stopped me cold. It was untouched. Beds made, summer dresses folded, 2 toothbrushes standing in a cup shaped like a whale. Every adult thing in that house had been packed, sorted, and spirited away. The one room they never planned around was the one with bunk beds. I filled 3 suitcases with little girl clothes and drove back to Dorchester with my knuckles white the whole way. This was no vacation gone wrong. This was an evacuation and the children hadn't made the manifest. My mother flew home 3 days later on a ticket I bought because hers had been part of Patricia's booking and Patricia's booking was a crime scene now. At least in my head. Her name is Judith. She's 64 and she came off that flight looking like a woman who'd aged a season in a week. She'd boarded at Logan believing the story Patricia fed her the night before that I'd been pulled onto a shift. That I'd volunteered to stay back with the girls. She said, "You know how Faith is," Mom told me, twisting her rings. And I did know. That's the thing. It sounded exactly like you. She found out the truth when they landed on the island and I finally got through to her and she spent the next 3 days in a hotel room arguing with her older daughter through a locked bedroom door. She wouldn't tell me everything that was said. But when I laid it out for her at my kitchen table, the note in the plastic sleeve, the emptied closets, the stack of final notices, my mother did the thing she has always done. She reached for the shape of the story that hurt least. She panicked Faith. Whatever's going on with Derek's business, she panicked. People do terrible things when they panic. She's your sister. I said the girls were sleeping 30 feet away and had her daughter asked about them even once. Mom looked at her hands and then she said the other thing, the one she said my whole life, the one she thinks is a compliment. Besides, you're good at this. You've always been the strong one. There it was. The porch, the hairbrush, the window. I stood up and rinsed a cup that was already clean. I love my mother, but that night I understood I'd be doing this alone, the way I'd apparently been assigned to do it before I was even asked. A month later, 2 men in dark suits rang my buzzer. They hadn't come about the girls, but before the suits, let me show you July, because July is where the new life set its bones. My schedule became a spreadsheet with no white space. Dana traded me on to day shifts, calling in favors she'd been owed since the Bush administration. And every morning, I made 2 lunches with the crusts cut off 2 different ways because, God forbid, twins be the same person. I enrolled the girls in the summer program at the school near my condo, which required a guardianship letter I didn't have yet, which required a call to a legal aid line, which required holding for 50 minutes with a child on each knee. Paperwork became my second language. And in the middle of all that bureaucratic mud, one small green shoot. Quinn hadn't spoken more than a yes or a no since the airport. Not to me, not to Sadie, not to the therapist the pediatrician recommended. Then on a Tuesday evening on the stoop, the neighbor's orange cat came and sat against her sneaker like he'd been assigned there. And Quinn leaned down and told that cat in a whisper I barely caught. "We live here now." A whole sentence whispered to a cat. I went inside and cried into a dish towel with the water running so nobody would hear me. And then I wrote it in the notebook. Dated because progress is progress. And I chart everything now. 2 days later, an envelope arrived from the probate and family court. A hearing date for temporary guardianship. 2nd week of July. I stuck it to the fridge right beside the letter from Seattle. And I stood there a long minute looking at my whole future filed under one magnet. The lawyer I found was named Ruth Allupper. And I liked her in the first 90 seconds because she talked to me the way I talked to parents in the ER. No syrup, no doom, just the map. Temporary guardianship first. She said supervised by DCF. It gets you school enrollment, medical consent, insurance. What it doesn't get you is permanence. If the parents object from abroad, this turns into a longer road. Understand that going in? I said I understood. I halved. The hearing itself took 19 minutes in a courtroom that smelled like old radiators. Marisol's report did most of the talking. The judge was a small gray woman with reading glasses on a chain, and she flipped pages for a while and then looked at me over the top of them. "Miss Ingram, you're single, you work full-time, and you're taking on 7-year-old twins." It wasn't really a question, so I waited. "Do you understand this may not be temporary?" she said. The room got very quiet. Ruth had prepped me for forms and dates. Not for that. I thought about the backpack by my door and the countdown still running in my phone. 60 days to Seattle. I understand. I said that they need a permanent somebody. I'm what's here. The judge studied me a second longer than was comfortable. Then signed temporary guardian review in 90 days. In the elevator down, my phone buzzed. An automated email. Cheerful blue banner from the nurse practitioner program in Seattle. Reminder, confirm your seat by August worse. We're excited to meet you. The doors opened on the parking level. I did not confirm my seat. I also did not decline it. I put the phone in my pocket and drove home to make dinner. The suits came on a Thursday, 10 days after the hearing. Federal agents, and they showed their credentials slowly, the way you'd show a card trick. The older one, Whitfield, had gray at his temples and a voice like a librarian. They sat at my kitchen table, declined coffee, and asked their questions in tidy rows. When had I last spoken to Derek Hale? What did I know about Hale Coastal Partners? Had I ever been solicited to invest? I answered all of it straight because the truth was short. Derek had pitched me once at Thanksgiving 2 years back. A real estate fund, coastal vacation properties, friends and family returns. I'd asked to see the audited statements. He laughed and topped off my wine and called me the family actuary, and the subject never came back. You asked for audits. Whitfield repeated, writing, anyone else in the family asked that kind of question? I said, no, and something in how his pen paused told me the answer mattered. They were 40 minutes into wire transfers and dates when Whitfield glanced at his folder and asked almost gently, did your mother invest? The kitchen went still. I said I didn't know. He nodded like that was an answer, too. And maybe it was. People ask me why I talked to them at all. Why I answered every question that day about my own sister. It's simple. The truth was the only thing in that house Patricia hadn't packed and taken with her, and I intended to keep it where I could see it. If you've ever had to choose between protecting family and telling the truth, then you know how heavy a doorbell can sound. And if you're still with me, do me one favor and hit subscribe, because the next part is the one that kept me up at night. After the agents left, I called my mother. She didn't pick up all evening. She came over the next morning instead before 8, still in her church cardigan, and I knew before the kettle boiled. My mother had put money into Derek's fund. Not mad money, not a flyer. She had taken out $180,000 against the Quincy house. The paid-off house, the house my father died still bragging about, and wired it to Hale Coastal Partners in 2 installments the previous fall. Patricia set up the meeting, she said to her teacup. Derek showed me statements, 14% faith. It was for my care someday, so I'd never be a burden on you girls. Then quieter, Patricia said not to tell you. She said you'd worry it to death, that you'd make it smaller than it was. I sat there doing the math nobody wanted. I had warned them. 2 Thanksgivings ago, I'd said the returns looked painted on, said it at the table, and been laughed at in stereo. I'd even mailed Mom an article about investment fraud aimed at retirees, which she'd received the way you receive a pamphlet from a teenager. There was no satisfaction in any of it. Now, being right is a cold lunch. What got me sitting across from her while her tea went gray was the architecture of it. Patricia hadn't just taken the money and run. She'd pre-cut the wire that would have tripped the alarm. Me with one sentence about my personality. Don't tell Faith. She worries. My worry was the security system, and my sister had known the code her whole life. Mom left around 9, smaller than her coat. At the door, she stopped. There must be an explanation, she said. She needed there to be. Losing the house was one thing. Losing the story of her golden daughter was the thing she couldn't price. 6 weeks in, my condo had reorganized itself around a piece of luggage. The purple backpack still stood by my front door, zipped, straps up, ready. Suddy repacked it every Sunday night. Fresh pajamas, the rabbit, a new juice box, and checked on it before bed. The way a sentry checks a gate. So, we're ready when Mom comes back. She'd stopped saying the sentence out loud. The backpack said it for her. Dana tripped over it one evening bringing casserole and started to move it against the wall. And I heard my own voice come out sharper than I knew I had in me. Leave it. Nobody moves it but Sadie. Because here's what I understood by then. Watching that little girl stand watch over a bag. You cannot argue a child out of a door she's decided to keep open. You can only make sure the room behind her is warm while she stands there. So, the backpack became house law. Company stepped around it. I vacuumed around it. It was the first thing you saw walking in and the last thing I saw turning off the lights. A purple flag planted at the border between the life my sister blew up and the one I was building out of the wreckage. And late that same night, Patricia finally made contact. Day 44. Not that anyone was charting it. A voice note breezy as a beach read. Ice clinking somewhere behind her. Faith. Hi. It's me. Don't be dramatic. Listen. Be a doll. I need you to FedEx the girls' passports to the address I'm texting you. It's gorgeous here. You'd die. I played it 3 times standing in my dark kitchen. 44 days, 2 daughters. And the first word from Paradise was not, "How are they sleeping?" It was logistics. She wanted their passports. I stood in the kitchen with her voice notes still hanging in the air. And I thought about every time I'd said yes to my sister with my teeth clenched. Yes to the wedding clipboard. Yes to babysitting announced as fact. Yes. Apparently in absentia at a departure gate. Then I typed my reply and it was a single line. No, I watched the little check marks turn blue and put the phone in a drawer. Actually, in a drawer, like it was hot. Reader, I had never once told Patricia no in 34 years. The word felt like a bone popping back into socket. 3 hours later, she posted, not to me, at me. A long caption about family sabbaticals, about how the people who question your journey are the ones who never had the courage to take one. About jealousy wearing the costume of concern. 200,000 strangers gave it little hearts. I read it once and felt weirdly calm, like I'd finally been handed the owner's manual. Every crisis had a caption. Every caption had a villain. And the villain was never her. Ruth told me to mute her, not block her. Keep the channel open, she said. Forward me everything. Answer nothing. Then Ruth called back the next day with something in her voice I hadn't heard before. She'd gotten the guardianship file cross-referenced with the public docket, the way careful lawyers do, and found a detail. The account that paid the twins' private school last year came from Hale Coastal Partners directly. And one of the authorized signers on that account was not Derek. It was Patricia, my sister, who told everyone she didn't do the money side. She had signing power the whole time. The wife who knew nothing was a costume, too. The second email from Seattle came with a red banner instead of a blue one. Final reminder, confirm your seat by August 1st or it will be released to the wait list. Dana read it over my shoulder in the break room and put her coffee down. You've earned that seat 6 years, she said. Nobody on this earth would blame you. DCF finds placements, good ones. You could visit, video call, send money. You don't have to set yourself on fire. She wasn't wrong, and I want to be honest about that. There was a version of this where I went, and it was a defensible version. That same week, I took the girls for their checkup, and their pediatrician, a soft-spoken man who'd been seeing them since they were born, asked to talk to me alone for a minute. He used the phrase attachment disruption. He said, kids their age after an abandonment tend to attach hard and fast to whoever holds steady, and that every additional move re-breaks the same bone. Whatever you decide, he said, decide at once. That night, the condo was quiet by 9 o'clock. I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open, the confirmation page up, the cursor blinking in the little box like a heart monitor. Seattle on one side of the table, down the hall, a nightlight, 2 beds pushed together, and a packed purple backpack aimed at my front door. You should be taking care of the kids, my sister had written, meaning it as a leash. I sat there a long time thinking about the difference between a leash and a choice and whether I could even tell them apart anymore after a lifetime of wearing one and calling it a personality. I didn't click anything. Not yet. The summer program called me at work on a Wednesday. There had been an incident. A boy in their group had heard his parents talking the way kids do and announced at snack time, "Your mom's famous." "My mom says she's a thief." Quinn walked out of the room, found the coat closet, climbed under the bottom shelf, and stayed there for 2 hours. They didn't find her until Sati stopped answering questions and just pointed. Sati, for her part, had already punched the boy in the arm hard enough to require an ice pack and a form. I signed the form. I could not entirely condemn the crime. I drove them home the long way and in the rear-view mirror I watched Sada's face go through its gears and then she broke. Really broke for the first time since June. The narrator finally out of script. Why didn't she take us? She screamed and the sound filled the car like water. We're small. We fit. I pulled over on a side street in Milton and got in the back seat and held them both while traffic went by like nothing was ending. I'm a pediatric nurse. I have held a lot of people's children while they cried. It is different when the child is yours. And that was the afternoon I stopped pretending these two weren't mine. The intake therapist saw the girls that Thursday, and afterward, she waved me in alone. I expected homework, coping charts, a pamphlet. Instead, she looked at me the way Marisol had at my door in June, kind and level. "They're doing about how I'd expect," she said. "They have you. So, here's my actual question." She folded her hands. "Who's taking care of you?" I never answered the therapist because the honest answer was a spreadsheet and a dish towel. And that same week, the easy road closed for good. Ruth called me in and slid a letter across her desk. Heavy paper, a Boston firm's name across the top in competent navy blue. Counsel retained on behalf of Patricia Hale. My sister, from an island with frozen credit cards allegedly looming, had found the money to hire lawyers. The letter objected formally and politely to any extension of guardianship beyond temporary status. It requested the court preserve the parents' full custodial rights pending their return and referred to the events of June 14 as an informal child-care arrangement among family members. I read that phrase 3 times. An informal child-care arrangement. The note in the plastic sleeve, the purple backpacks. Quinn's thumb back in her mouth at a departure gate. Ruth watched me read and didn't rush me. "Understand what this is?" She said she won't come back for them. She also won't release them. Right now, those girls are the last thing she has that a court might weigh in her favor someday. Proof she's a mother. Leverage in a plea, a story to tell. She's keeping the door propped faith, not to walk through it, just so nobody else can close it. I asked what the long road looked like. Ruth didn't dress it up. Contested guardianship review in the fall. If the criminal case broke the right way, a petition to terminate parental rights, abandonment, unfitness, then adoption, a year at best, longer. If Patricia fought from a distance, and Patricia had never not fought for an audience. "One more thing," Ruth said, tapping the letter. "Save this. Someday it may prove she knew exactly where her children were, and chose the beach." On July 31, the last day, I worked a day shift, picked up the girls, made tacos, supervised a bath negotiation worthy of the UN, and read 2 chapters of a book about a mouse with a motorcycle. Then, with the condo asleep, I sat down at the kitchen table, opened the laptop, and wrote 4 sentences to the program director in Seattle. I thanked her. I withdrew. I asked that my seat go to someone on the wait list with time to plan. I hit send at 11:41 p.m., 19 minutes ahead of a deadline I'd been staring down for a month. No drum roll. The refrigerator hummed somewhere outside, a car went by with its windows down, playing something with horns in it. I lost the deposit. $2,500. Gone the way money goes. The seat itself was gone by morning, confirmed by a form reply with a smiley face in it that I choose not to describe further. I told no one for 3 days, not even Dana, because I could not stand to hear it argued within either direction. Here's what I did instead. I took the acceptance letter down off the fridge and I put up the girls' back-to-school checklist and the card for their next dentist appointment under the same lighthouse magnet. "Even trade," said the magnet. I stood there and let it be true and untrue at the same time. I want to tell you I felt pure and certain. I felt like a woman who had just torn up a map she'd spent 6 years drawing on behalf of 2 kids who might be reclaimed like baggage by a stranger with a caption for every occasion. I told myself I chose it. Some nights for a while I still checked the math on that. But when I turned off the kitchen light, the purple backpack was standing at the door and for the first time it didn't look like it was pointed out. It looked like it was guarding in. In September, the other shoe dropped in a federal courthouse. And the name on the indictment wasn't only Derek's. Dana found out about Seattle from a mutual friend in scheduling, and she didn't speak to me for a day and a half, which for Dana is a silent retreat. When she finally cornered me by the med cart, she had her arms crossed. "You didn't even let me fight you on it." I told her the truth, which I'd only just figured out myself. "Being volunteered and volunteering are different countries," I said. I've lived my whole life in the first one. I finally moved. She looked at me a long second, then uncrossed her arms and said she was bringing casserole Sunday, and I could not stop her, which is Dana, for I love you. And the house found its rhythm. Dinner at 6:30, homework at the kitchen table, baths, the mouse, and his motorcycle. Quinn started talking again to people now. Not just the cat. Short sentences placed carefully like stones across a creek, but hers. Sada's teacher sent home a note that said, "Natural leader," which we both knew was teacher speak for bossy, and I framed it anyway. On a Tuesday in mid-September, the rhythm hiccuped. Two things happened an hour apart. The bank finally took the Weston house and a photographer from a local paper stood on the sidewalk getting a shot of the auction notice on that $40 fake rock lawn, and my phone started ringing with numbers I didn't know. A reporter, then another one. Voicemails using the word collapse. I didn't call back. I made dinner, but I knew what it meant. Something heavy was coming loose and my family's name was under it. The indictment was unsealed on a Thursday. Hale Coastal Partners had never bought most of the coastal properties in its brochures. Money from new investors paid fake returns to earlier ones, and the rest paid for the house, the cars, the trips, the brand. Derek was charged with wire fraud and money laundering, a dozen counts. And there, 4 lines down, was my sister, Patricia Hale, promoter, authorized signer, charged in the conspiracy. The complaint quoted her own posts back at her, the tours of the kitchen, the "Our investors are family reel," filmed the same week the fund's account couldn't cover a $900 wire. The victim list did the real damage in our world. Neighbors from Quincy, 2 retired teachers from my mother's parish, the Parents Association at a school in Weston, and Judith Ingram, $180,000, secured against her home. I drove to Mom's that evening and found her in front of the television with the sound off, the remote balanced on her knee like she'd forgotten it. On the screen, a reporter stood outside the shuttered Western house. Mom didn't look away from it. I keep waiting for her to call me and explain. She said her whole life, Faith. If Derek had statements, she carried them in her good handbag. If there was a party, she knew what it cost. Then my mother said the sentence I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. The one that cost her the most. She knew. No excuse attached. No, she panicked. No, she's your sister. Just that. Sat down like a full suitcase. I took the remote gently out of her hand and turned the television off. That night, for the first time in 12 years, Patricia's Instagram went dark. No posts, no stories, nothing. The next voice note from my sister arrived in October, and the beach was gone from her voice. No ice clinking, no Faith, low and fast, almost a whisper like someone talking in a stairwell. I need you to wire me $4,000. I know you have it. You always have it. You've been saving since you were 9. It's for the girls' sake, Faith. Their mother cannot be seen begging. Do you understand what that does to them? To their name. I stood at my kitchen window and listened to it twice. And what struck me wasn't the ask. It was the grammar. Cannot be seen begging. Even now, with the fund gutted and the house gone and federal charges pinned to her name like a corsage, the verb that mattered to my sister was seen. Not be seen. Snorts, I didn't answer. I forwarded it to Ruth, logged it in the notebook, dated, and went back to quizzing Suddy on spelling words. Here's the thing I want to say to you watching this, because I know some of you have your own Patricia. 8 months earlier, a single call from my sister could reorganize my entire week. Now, her voice was weather, something I noted and dressed for. If you've ever finally stopped orbiting someone, you know that silence isn't cruelty, it's gravity going back to its rightful owner. Drop a comment if you've been there and hit subscribe if you haven't, because what my sister did next, I truly never saw coming. It was a Tuesday night, 9 o'clock, girls asleep, when Ruth called my cell instead of my email, which Ruth never does. Her voice had its courtroom flatness on. Are you sitting down? She said. It's Derek. Derek had been detained on the island. He'd tried to renew a visa that was past renewing with a federal warrant sitting in the system like a tripwire, and immigration officers walked him out of a government office in flip-flops. The island, it turned out, had no appetite for hosting Americans on a fraud indictment. Within weeks, both of their entry permissions were revoked. The accounts were frozen. All of them down to the one that had been paying the Boston lawyers. Ruth summarized the situation with the driest sentence I've ever heard, billed by the hour. Paradise has a checkout time. Derek went into custody to await transfer back to the States. And Patricia went quiet. Fully quiet for the first time in her adult life. Her own lawyers couldn't raise her for 3 weeks. No posts, no voice notes, no counsel calls. My mother lit a candle at church, and I want you to sit with the absurdity of that. A woman who lost her retirement to her daughter lighting a candle for her. I didn't light anything. I checked homework and worked my shifts and watched the door of it all because I knew my sister. Silence from Patricia was never absence. Silence was backstage somewhere on that island in whatever room was left to her, with no audience, no money, and no Derek. My sister was doing the thing she did best, deciding what the next scene would be. And the only stage she had left, the only set she hadn't burned, was standing in my hallway in Dorchester with a purple backpack by the door. While my sister planned her next act, her daughters kept quietly outgrowing the last one. Halloween came and Quinn wanted to be a nurse like Aunt Faith, but for kids, which is in fact my exact job, and I did not correct her because I was too busy having something in my eye. Suddy went as an astronaut and took the helmet off within a block, informing me that space was overrated but candy was real. In November, Quinn's class had show and tell, and she stood up in front of 19 children. This is the girl who spent June under a coat closet shelf and held up a picture she'd drawn and said, "This is my aunt. She fixes kids at night. We live at her house and my bed is by the window." Her teacher emailed me that afternoon because she thought I'd want to know, and she was right. The drawing came home in a folder and went up on the refrigerator, crayon on construction paper, 3 stick figures, and a cat we don't own titled in ferocious capitals, Aunt Faith's house. It hangs at kid height because that's who it belongs to. I want to be honest with you though about what healing actually looks like. That same week, Suddy repacked the purple backpack on Sunday night. Same as every Sunday. Fresh juice box, wrapped on top, zipped it, and stood it by the door. Progress isn't a straight line. It's a drawing on the fridge and a packed bag by the door in the same apartment held by the same small, stubborn heart. In early December, Marisol came by with news. The state was changing the goal of the case. The new word in the file was permanency. Ruth laid the road out on her whiteboard like a nurse walking a family through a surgery. With the indictment public, with Derek in custody and Patricia unreachable even to her own counsel, with the June airport report, the connecting international tickets, the packed closets, and with that letter from her lawyers, dated and signed, proving she'd known for months exactly where her daughters were and had chosen not to come back for them. There were now grounds to petition for termination of parental rights, abandonment, unfitness. After that, adoption. Her own objection letter is the rope. Ruth said she wrote to a court to keep the door propped open, and in doing so she confirmed she was never walking through it. My 8 months of charting mattered too. It turned out the notebook, the receipts, the school forms, the therapy logs, every pediatric appointment kept and dated. Not one line of it had been written to impress a judge. That, Ruth said, is exactly what impresses a judge. I signed the petition on a Tuesday afternoon in December in Ruth's office with a pen from a bank that no longer existed. My signature is nothing like my sister's. Hers is a performance, all loops, built to be photographed at book signings that never happened. Mine looks like a heart rate, but mine keeps its promises, and now it was on file. Ruth capped the pen and gave me the warning label. If she comes back and contests this, it gets long and it gets ugly. She'll be fighting for her sentencing profile, not for the girls, which means she'll fight like it's her life because it is. I said I understood. This time I actually did. And weeks later, my sister came home. Ruth called on a gray Tuesday in February. Patricia had landed at Logan the night before, surrendered at the airport by arrangement, processed, arraigned, and released on conditions. Passport gone, travel restricted, ankle monitor under the winter boots. Her new criminal lawyer had negotiated the return once the island stopped being hospitable and the money stopped being money. There was no Peru walk on the news, which I suspect cost her something to arrange. Or maybe there was just nothing left to pay for one with. My mother called an hour later, breathless, cycling between relief and dread in the space of single sentences. She's home. She's safe. Faith. She wants to see the girls. I was standing in my living room when she said it, watching Suddy and Quinn build something ambitious out of Lego on the rug. A tower with a wing coming off it at an angle engineering would not forgive. Quinn had her tongue between her teeth. Suddy was narrating the build. They didn't know their mother was 30 m away for the first time in 8 months. And I got to decide when they would because a court order said so. And I had learned to be grateful for paper. I told Mom that visits weren't mine to grant anymore. There was a case, a caseworker, a process. All true, all also a wall. And I built it calmly. Then I hung up and stood there doing inventory. The way you do before a night shift, you know, will be bad. My sister was out on conditions with lawyers to pay and one asset left that wasn't frozen. I just didn't know yet that the asset she'd come to collect was me. She came on a Sunday at 4 in the afternoon unannounced, which was its own kind of message. Patricia never arrived anywhere without a plan for the lighting. The girls were at my mother's for the afternoon, a scheduled thing, cocoa, and a puzzle. And I have wondered since whether my sister knew that. And I've stopped wondering because of course she did. I opened the door and there she was 8 months later, thinner. The camel coat still immaculate, the hair still obedient, the face still doing its job. The front of the house is always the last thing to fall. Faith, she said, warm as a talk show and walked past me into my kitchen like it was a set she dressed herself. She admired nothing. Her eyes did one lap. Counters, drawings, dishes, drying, cataloging, pricing, and then she sat at my table and folded her hands and pitched me. I'll give her this. It was clean. I'm going to make this simple because we're sisters and I love you. I will sign consent for you to adopt the girls. Full consent. Clean forever. No fight. No years of lawyers eating your savings. They stay here in this sweet little life you built. You get everything you want. She let that sit, then leaned in for the price. In exchange, 2 small things. You tell the prosecutor the airport was a misunderstanding. An arrangement between sisters that got garbled, child care, family being family, and the girls do a few afternoons with me before sentencing. Lunch, the aquarium, nothing scary. Some photos. My attorney says the judge needs to see a mother. From her good handbag, she drew a document already prepared, tabbed where signatures would go, and slid it across my table, past the fruit bowl to rest in front of me. Consent to adoption. My name typed neat on the petitioner line. The whole thing needed only dates and ink. Everybody wins, my sister said softly and smiled the smile that 200,000 strangers used to love. The girls get you. I get a chance. You get everything you ever wanted, Faith. All you have to do is say one small thing that isn't quite true. I want to be honest about the next 60 seconds because I've never told anyone how close it was. Everything I wanted sat on my kitchen table with signature tabs. Permanence for the girls, no contested hearing, no year of motions, no chance, however small Ruth called it, of some future courtroom sending them back into the orbit of a woman with a caption for everything. All of it, one signature away, and the cost was a soft sentence to a prosecutor. A story about a misunderstanding, the kind of lie families tell every day. I'd like to say I never wavered. I wavered. I looked at the tabs and thought, who gets hurt? And then the answer stood up in me, wearing scrubs, holding a notebook. The truth was the only thing in this family Patricia had never managed to pack, sell, or stage. It was the one room she'd never gotten into. If I lent it to her now, rented it even once, even softly, then every dinner I put on this table for the next 40 years would be furniture in one of her productions, and the girls would grow up inside the lesson without ever being taught it out loud. That the truth is a prop, that love photographs best from the right angle, that everything is for sale to family. They had already been left at a gate by that lesson. I would not enroll them in it twice. No, I said quiet. Level, the voice I use at 3 a.m. to tell parents hard things. I won't lie to a prosecutor for you, and I won't rent the girls to your camera. I slid the document back across the table, past the fruit bowl, undated, and signed. I'll take the long road. The petition's filed. You can fight it, and I'll be there every hearing on time with 8 months of Tuesdays in a notebook. That's what I've got, Patricia. Tuesdays. Turns out they hold up. My sister blinked and I watched the performance stall. The first unscripted second I'd seen on that face since June. Then her voice climbed. Do you know what they'll do to me? The nail of her index finger started tapping the table. Tap tap tap. A metronome losing its mind. And that was the moment we both heard the key in my front door. My mother has a key for emergencies. And to be fair, Coco running out at halftime of a puzzle qualifies at 7 years old. She came in ahead of the girls calling my name and stopped short in the hallway. Sadie and Quinn came out around her, mittens still on, cheeks red from the cold, and stopped too. The apartment went very still, 8 months. There stood their mother, camel coat, perfect hair, half risen from her chair with her arms already opening for a scene we could all feel her framing. Neither girl moved toward her. Sudie stepped in closer to my hip and her mittened hand found my hand and held on, and she looked up at me and asked, "Is she staying for dinner?" "Not Mom's here." Not a running hug, a scheduling question addressed to the management. And then Quinn, my Quinn, who once went whole weeks without a sentence, looked at the woman in the camel coat and gave her one, complete, polite, and final. "This is Aunt Faith's house." I watched it land. I watched my sister's eyes go from her daughters to the refrigerator, to the crayon drawing at kid height, 3 stick figures, and a cat we don't own. Aunt Faith's house in ferocious capitals, and then passed it down the hall to the front door she'd walked through where a purple backpack stood zipped and ready, straps up the way it had stood for 8 months. She knew that backpack. She'd bought it. She'd photographed it on a first day of school post with a caption about wings. I watched my sister understand in one long unphotographable second what it was doing by my door. That a 7-year-old had kept a bag packed for her every Sunday night, juice box rotated fresh for 240 days, and that the child holding my hand right now was the one who had finally stopped mentioning it. Her face went pale, not sentencing pale, not frozen accounts pale, pale like a woman doing arithmetic she cannot make come out, subtracting an audience that has left the theater. "You were right about one thing, Patricia," I said, and I kept my voice the way I keep it in the worst rooms, even and low. "Someone should be taking care of the kids." She looked at the window. Dark outside, kitchen bright inside. The glass gave her back her own reflection, and I watched her hand rise on autopilot and fix a strand of hair that was already perfect. "Mom always said, people only love what they can see," she said barely out loud. To the glass, to the hair, to whoever was left in the cheap seats. For one breath, she was 14 again on a porch being brushed for the neighbors, and I felt the old ache reach for her. Then she picked up her handbag, left the consent form on my table, and walked out past the backpack without looking down at it. The door clicked. Nobody chased her. I told the prosecutor the truth, which took 11 minutes and changed nothing about the weather. Whitfield walked me out afterward and shook my hand like a librarian returning a book. The case never needed me to be a hero, and I'd stopped auditioning for that job anyway. The evidence did what evidence does. In April, Derek pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering, and a federal judge gave him 9 years and a restitution order he will be paying from whatever afterlife accepts his currency. Patricia's lawyers read the same file everyone else did, the signing authority, the quoted captions, the investor list with her mother's name on it. And in May, my sister took a plea. 30 months restitution, the standard alphabet after her name where the followers used to be. I wasn't in the courtroom. I was at a second-grade spring concert filming 2 off-key recorders with my whole heart. The snorts termination hearing came in June, 1 year almost to the day from the gate at Logan. Ruth stacked the record like cordwood, the airport report and the note in the plastic sleeve, the international tickets, the objection letter that proved she knew and stayed. The plea and a year of my Tuesdays. School forms, therapy logs, dated dinners, the pediatrician's letter, the teacher's emails. Patricia did not contest it. On the advice of the council, she could no longer really afford. Parental rights terminated, both parents. The judge with the reading glasses was long rotated off the docket. But I thought about her question the whole drive home. Do you understand this may not be temporary? Your Honor, I understood it eventually. Ruth called that evening off the clock. No billing in her voice. You didn't win this today, she said. You won it every Tuesday at 6:30 at that table. Today, the Commonwealth just agreed. Here's where everyone ended up because you've earned the accounting. Snorts, my mother sold the Quincy house in the fall. The fraud recovery will drip back pennies for years, and pennies don't pay a mortgage taken out at 63. She cried on the porch steps the day of the closing on the exact spot where a hairbrush once performed love for the neighbors. And then she moved into a small, bright apartment 2 miles from us, and at 65, learned the bus schedule. She comes for dinner every Tuesday. She is learning slowly on purpose how to praise 2 little girls without straightening their collars first, and she fails some Tuesdays and she comes back the next Tuesday anyway, which is the whole assignment. One night drying the good pot she stopped and said to the window, I saw you Faith all those years. I just thought easy meant fine. Then she hung up the towel and said it plainer. I should have said it out loud. I'm saying it now. We didn't hug or make a scene of it. I refilled her tea. Some apologies are better with saucers under them. Patricia writes from the facility in Connecticut. The letters read like captions that lost their photos. Journey's growth. This chapter. She has never once in any of them asked what the girls eat for breakfast, which tells you what the letters are for. I answer with school pictures and short weather. The door isn't mine to seal. When the girls are grown, they'll decide what to do with their mother, and they'll decide it from solid ground, which is the only inheritance I ever wanted to leave them. The adoption was finalized on a Thursday morning in a small courtroom with bad carpet and good light the summer after the girls turned 8. No cameras. Dana took the day off and cried louder than anyone. The judge let Suddy bang the gavel and Quinn asked if she had anything to say, considered the question with her tongue between her teeth and said, we already live there. The which the judge called the finest legal argument she'd heard all year. And the night before, I need you to know this happened on its own because I would never have dared suggest it. Suddy unpacked the purple backpack. No announcement. I walked past the girl's room and saw her kneeling at her dresser, putting the pajamas in the drawer, standing the rabbit on the pillow, dropping the last juice box in the recycling with a little clink. She folded the empty backpack flat, the way you fold a flag, and put it on the closet shelf up high. Done. Then she came out to the kitchen and asked what was for dinner, and I said, tacos. And that was the entire ceremony. On my refrigerator today at kid height, there's a new school photo. Quinn's collar crooked. Suddy missing a front tooth. Both of them mid-laugh because the photographer sneezed. It's held up by tape and a lighthouse magnet. Nobody filtered it. Nobody staged it. Nobody will ever monetize it. It is by every metric my sister ever lived by. A terrible photo. It's my favorite thing I own. I spent 34 years believing love was a bill that came due every month. And it took 2 7-year-olds and 1 locked purple backpack to teach me what my sister's 200,000 followers never could. That the love that saves you is never the kind that performs. It's the kind that shows up on a Tuesday, sets the table, checks the homework, leaves the hallway light on, and stays. That's my story. One canceled ticket, 2 girls at a gate, and a backpack that finally came unpacked. If this reminded you of someone who shows up quietly for the kids, for the family, for you, send them this video and tell them you see them. Drop a comment with where you're listening from. Hit subscribe so you never miss a story. And I'll see you in the next.